everyone. I'm Shalini Sera, following Advanced Diploma in General Nursing at IHS. My topic for today is History of Health Research Ethics. Moving on with the presentation, when you see health research ethics, what is popping up your head? What are the key words that you think of? Maybe they are ethical standards, standards of conduct, ethical principles, certain words like protection, dignity, rights, welfare, and other big organizations like World Health Organization. This is because most of us are in the health sector and most of us have heard, at least learned what these health research ethics are. Ethics play a vital role in health research with the development of health industry, law and human rights. So why are we talking about history of health research ethics? This is mostly due to, if we talk about the history of the health research ethics, it's kind of an open can of worms. Why I say that is, there were no consumer regulations, no Food and Drug Administration Act, no common rule, and no institutional review boards in the early days. So what my presentation follows is a brief discussion as to why federal rules and regulations were established and why institutional review boards became a necessity when it comes to health research ethics. So the major problem in health research ethics was due to the use of vulnerable groups as well as uninformed consent. So who are these vulnerable group populations? So they are children, pregnant women, prisoners, psychiatric patients and disabled. So moving on with the history, if we go back to early 70s, we can't forget the world famous scientist who found the cure or the vaccine for smallpox. So what's the big problem in this? He was a great scientist and his experiments were a success. But in 1796, he carried out his famous experiment on smallpox on 8-year-old James Phipps, who was the son of his milkmaid. Jenner inserted pus taken from a cowpox pustule and inserted it into an incision on this boy's arm. He was testing his theory drawn from a folklore of the countryside that milkmaids who suffered with mild disease of cowpox never contracted smallpox. Smallpox was one of the greatest killers of that period, especially among the children. So the study says that when Jenner first put forward his research papers, it has been first rejected by these medical councils. They said this is mostly due to this violation of ethical principles. But however, due to lack of ethics and the rules and regulations in that period, Jenner has continued doing his experiment further on several young people, especially children less than 5-year-olds, including his 11-month-old child. So he has got lucky because his experiment was a success. So imagine the adverse results that may have occurred if he failed his experiment without any ethics involved in the research. So moving on, the most dramatic and well-known chapter in the history of research with human participants occurred in Nazi concentration camps in the time of World War II. This was mainly due to the involvement of 23 leading German scientists who took part in war crimes and crimes against humanity. They used prisoners in these concentration camps to test on their research experiments. The suspects were involved in over more than 3.5 million, and several thousands of them were murdered during these experiments, and some of them were permanently disabled or crippled. So now I'm going to show you some pictures that have been taken during this period. So this, what this picture shows is the Nazi doctors overseeing a medical experiment being performed on a prisoner immersed in ice-cold water. They say that these scientists used prisoners and they got them naked or some of them with clothes, and they immersed these prisoners on freezing cold water, and they kept them for days to do their experiments, and they say that most of the prisoners died on the spot. Now what you can see here is one of the brutal experiments conducted by the Nazi scientists. This was performed on nearly 1,500 sets of imprisoned twins. What you can see in this picture is two babies who have been sewed together in an attempt to create conjoined twins. This is another experiment conducted by these the German scientists, which they try to keep the prisoners alive for 15 days, nothing but with gas. This is another experiment, bone, muscle and joint transplantation experiment. What these doctors did was they executed the limbs of these prisoners, and just to determine whether or not these limbs, muscles, joints could be transplanted into someone else. So, what is the right they have to use these prisoners on their experiments without getting their consent? So, all of this happened during the World War II, and after the World War II, what happened was, on December 9, 1946, when an American military tribunal opened criminal proceedings against those 23 leading German physicians and administrators for their willing participation on war crimes and crimes against humanity. Among the charges were that German physicians conducted medical experiments on thousands of concentration camp prisoners without their consent. Although these trials did not carry the force of law, the Nuremberg Code was the first international document which advocated voluntary participation and informed consent. Moving on in the history, in late 1950s, the thalidomide experiment was done. This is also considered as a part of the global medical disaster. They said thalidomide experiment had monstrous side effects. It was a drug sold worldwide under bewildering number of trade names to treat bewildering number of ailments. Tragically, one of them was to treat morning sickness. For pregnant women, it was no great remedy for nausea. For their unborn children, it was deadly. Thalidomide killed 10,000 of babies and left thousands more horribly deformed. Some midwives deliberately let limbless babies die. Some parents went mad or committed suicide or abandoned their infants to charities or the state. These pictures are the pictures of these babies who were over 12,000 who were born with severe deformities due to thalidomide. After US Senate hearing, the Drug and Cosmetic Act were passed into law to ensure drug efficacy and greater drug safety. For the first time, drug manufacturers were required to prove to the FDA the the effectiveness of their products before marketing them. Also, in 1964, the World Medical Association established recommendations guiding medical doctors in biomedical research involving human participants, which was the Declaration of Helsinki 1964. Declaration of Helsinki defined rules for research combined with clinical care, and also it defined rules for non-therapeutic research. The issues addressed in the Declaration of Helsinki included, so this declaration stated that before experimenting their research, experimenting on the humans, every experiment is to be tested on animals, and also they introduced research protocols, and they also included significantly about the informed consent from research participants if necessary, and also they significantly mention about the qualified individuals who can be presented as participants in research experiments, and also risk should not exceed the benefit, which is the basis of good clinical practices that we are using today. But then it is very sad to know that even after the Declaration of Helsinki, a US research project conducted by US Public Health Service called Tuskegee Syphilis Study was carried out. It involved 600 low-income African American males, 400 of whom were infected with syphilis, were monitored for 40 years. Participants were not told about their disease. In some cases, when participants were diagnosed of having syphilis by other physicians, researchers intervened to prevent treatment. Many participants died of syphilis during this study. This study was stopped after its existence was publicized and when it became a political embarrassment. Due to the publicity of Tuskegee Syphilis Study, the National Research Act of 1974 was passed, and it identified the basic ethical principles that should underlie the conduct of research involving human participants, and to develop guidelines which should be followed to assure that such research is conducted in accordance with those principles. Therefore, the Commission drafted the Belmont Report, a foundation document for the ethics of human participants involved in research activities in the United States. The report is a statement of basic ethical principles containing respect for persons, beneficence and beneficence and justice, which are the three basic principles that we use in health research even today. Autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, veracity and fidelity are the basic ethical principles that we use in healthcare today. So when we talk about the healthcare and when we talk about ethics, we can't forget the important personnel, personnel Florence Nightingale. She is known as the mother of modern nursing as well as mother of modern nursing research. She is the sole reason for the honest and ethical profession of nursing that we are enjoying today. In present, practicing code of ethics for nurses is given by International Council for Nurses, the ICN. And what you can see here is what World Health Organization has built up, this is a framework which has been built by them with a set of guidelines to maintain the standards of ethics in health research, which has been used by several ethical review boards worldwide. FERC-SL is the ethics review committee which has been followed by several research review bodies in Sri Lanka. For all the nursing students and for all the nursing professionals presenting here today, these two books are the best recommended for the further referencing on nursing research. The first book is Nursing Research Principles and Methods, and the other book is Nursing Research, Generating and Assessing Evidence for Nursing Practice. So before I wind up my presentation, I would like to show you guys a video. This was made from the criminal wars that were the criminals that happened against the humanity in World War II.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to make a few observations and also tell you a few stories. First of all, Shalini's presentation was, I think, of very high quality. Before we get into the substance, I want to comment that she spoke well. She spoke slowly in the sense that she didn't rush it. So her pronunciation was good and we could understand the message at a slower pace rather than trying to keep up with her speed. That is very important when you make a presentation.